Okay, I have a question for you to start things off today, and I want you to be honest.
Uh-oh. All right, hit me.
When you think about, being good with money, or you think about investing, what is the very first image that pops into your head?
Oh, um, that's easy. I think of a room full of guys in fleece vests staring at, like, 6 different monitors.
Right.
I think of spreadsheets that are so wide they don't even fit on the screen. Complex formulas, the Federal Reserve, interest rates, PE ratios. Basically, I think of math.
Exactly. We treat money like it's physics, right? We treat it like engineering.
Yeah.
Like if you know the formula, if you have the data, if you're smart enough to do the calculus, you get the right answer. Input data, output wealth.
It's the default setting for almost everyone. We just
Yeah.
assume that financial success is a hard science. We think, if I just study the data, if I could just master the technicals, I'll win.
But here is where it gets really interesting. And this is why I'm so excited about the stack of sources we have today.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are doing a deep dive into the psychology of money, and the central thesis here is going to completely flip that script.
Oh, absolutely.
The research argues that doing well with money has actually very little to do with how smart you are.
Which is a relief for me, honestly.
Right. It's not about your IQ. It's not about where you went to school. It has almost everything to do with how you behave. It's about psychology, not finance.
It's the distinction between a hard science and a soft skill.
Mm-hmm.
And to really understand that, I think we have to look at a story that opens our source material. It's this concept of the paradox of the janitor and the executive.
I love this story.
I don't
It's
know.
such a perfect juxtaposition.
It really is.
It sounds like an urban legend, but it's completely true. So let's take you, the listener, back to the year 2014.
Yeah.
We have 2 deaths that make headlines, but for very, very different reasons.
Right. Let's start with Ronald Reed. Ronald was a rural Vermont native. And when I say rural, I mean he was the definition of low-key. He was the first person in his family to graduate high school. And get this, he actually hitchhiked to campus every day just to get his diploma.
That sets the scene right there. He's gritty, he's humble.
Extremely humble. He spent his entire adult life in what we would consider, low-income jobs. He fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years.
Whoa.
Then for 17 years, he swept floors as a janitor at JCPenney.
And from the source material, it sounds like he lived a life that matched that income exactly. He bought a small 2-bedroom house for $12,000 when he was 38, and he lived there for the rest of his life.
He did. He was a guy in a flannel shirt. The notes mention he chopped his own firewood for heat.
Just a totally unassuming life.
Exactly. When he died at age 92, the people who knew him just assumed he had very little. A janitor's salary, maybe a small pension, just a regular guy getting by.
Completely regular. Until the will was read. And that's when the shockwave hit.
Yeah. This former janitor, this guy who swept floors for nearly 2 decades, left $2 million to his stepkids.
Unbelievable.
And more than $6 million to his local hospital and library.
$8 million. A janitor. I mean, people must have been absolutely baffled. My first thought if I heard that would be, did he win the lottery?
Right.
Was there a secret inheritance? Did he find a bag of cash in the woods?
That's what everyone thought.
Yeah.
But there was no secret. There was no lottery. No rich uncle. Ronald Reed just saved what little he could. He lived below his means. He took those small savings and invested them in blue-chip stocks, just boring companies he recognized. And then he waited.
He waited.
He just waited
Yeah.
for decades. He let those tiny savings compound and be more than $8 million.
So hold that image in your mind. If you're listening to this, picture the janitor chopping firewood, wearing a flannel shirt, sitting on an $8 million fortune that nobody knew about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's look at the other side of this coin. The anti-Ronald, if you will. A man named Richard Fuscone.
Richard Fuscone was everything Ronald Reed was not. If you were betting on who would die rich, you bet on Fuscone every single time. He was a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive.
Yep.
He had an MBA. He was deep in the world of high finance.
He wasn't just in the industry, though. He was a star.
Oh, he was a superstar. He was on Crane's Business Magazine's 40 Under 40 list of successful business people. He was so successful that he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist.
And his lifestyle definitely reflected that success. We aren't talking about a small house in Vermont here.
Far from it. Fuscone lived in an 18,000-square-foot mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. And just to paint the picture for you, this house had 11 bathrooms, 2 swimming pools, 7 garages, and 2 elevators.
2 elevators.
Mm-hmm.
In a private home.
Yeah,
That is a level of wealth that is hard to even visualize.
it is. The maintenance alone on this property, I mean, just keeping the lights on and the pools clean, was roughly $90,000 a month.
$90,000 a month. That's more than most people earn in a full year.
But remember, he's a financial genius. He knows the math. He has the pedigree. But then the 2008 financial crisis hits.
And this is where the comparison gets brutal.
It turned Fuscone's finances into dust. He had high debt and illiquid assets, fancy things he couldn't sell quickly.
Right.
So when the market seized up, he had no cash flow. He went bankrupt. He told a judge in 2008, "I currently have no income."
No income.
None. His home was foreclosed. 5 months before the janitor Ronald Reed died and left millions to charity, Richard Fuscone's mansion, where guests used to dance on a see-through cover over the indoor pool, by the way, was sold in a foreclosure auction for 75% less than what the insurance company said it was worth.
This is the core question, isn't it? This is the paradox. In what other industry is this even possible?
It's a profound question. Think about it. Can you imagine a story where a janitor performs heart surgery better than a Harvard-trained surgeon?
No way. You'd be arrested for even trying.
Or a janitor designing a skyscraper better than a top-tier architect? Or building a nuclear reactor better than an engineer?
It's impossible. In those fields, training, education, and experience are the absolute prerequisites. You can't just behave your way into being a good surgeon.
Exactly. The gap between an amateur and a pro in those fields is infinite. But in investing, a janitor with no training, no connections, and no background in finance can massively outperform a top-tier expert.
Because Ronald Reed was patient and Richard Fuscone was greedy.
Right, and that behavioral difference completely eclipsed the massive gap in education and experience.
So the mission of this deep dive is to explore exactly that. We are going to look at the psychology of money. We're going to step away from the spreadsheets and look at the human brain. Because, as the sources say, investing isn't the study of finance, it's the study of how people behave with money.
And we have to start with the realization that when people make decisions that look crazy to us, they aren't actually crazy.
Right. This is our first major theme, the lens of experience. The premise here is that people do crazy things with money, but no one is crazy.
It sounds contradictory, but it's crucial. We all think we know how the world works. We think we're objective. But the reality is, your personal experiences with money make up maybe 0.0000001% of what's happened in the world, but they constitute about 80% of how you think the world works.
We are all anchored to our own history. The sources bring up this fascinating data on the generation gap and the stock market. It honestly explains why I used to argue with my dad about investing.
It's a great example of how timing shapes your worldview. Let's say you were born in 1970. That means your teenage years and your 20, those impressionable years where you're getting your first job, learning about the economy, those happened in the 80s and 90s.
The boom times.
Massive boom times. Adjusted for inflation, the S&P 500 increased tenfold during your formative years.
Tenfold. So if you're that person, your baseline assumption is just stocks make you rich.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You view the market as a wealth generator. You feel it in your gut. But let's say you were born in 1950 instead. That puts your formative investing years in the late 60s and 70s.
And what did the market do then?
It basically went nowhere. It was stagnant. Adjusted for inflation, it was a swamp.
So that person views the stock market as a risk, a scam, maybe, a place where money goes to die.
And neither person is wrong in terms of their own lived experience. They were just looking through different lenses. And you see the exact same thing with inflation.
Oh, yeah.
If you were born in the 1960s, you witnessed inflation triple prices in the late 70s and early 80s. You remember gas lines. You remember paychecks not stretching. You were scarred by it.
Whereas if you were born in 1990, inflation has been this low-level background noise for most of your life. Until very recently, it's never been a primary worry.
So when these two groups disagree on financial strategy, it's not because one is smart and the other is dumb. It's because they have experienced fundamentally different worlds.
This really hit home for me with the example of the lottery tickets. The sources call this the lottery ticket anomaly.
This is a tough one, but it's so important for empathy. The scat is staggering. Americans spend more on lottery tickets than on movies, video games, music, sports, and books combined.
That is insane. It's a massive industry. And when you break down who is buying them,
It's mostly low-income households. The data shows the heaviest buyers are people who often can't even come up with $400 in an emergency. They are spending hundreds a year on tickets.
now from a spreadsheet perspective, that is crazy. That is objectively a bad financial decision. Why throw money away when you are broke?
It is. The math doesn't work. It's a negative return. But if you try to look at it through the lens of their experience, the reasoning starts to emerge.
Walk us through that reasoning. How does it make sense to them?
Imagine you live paycheck to paycheck. You have debt. You have no savings. You can't afford the nice house, the vacation, the new car. You can't put your kids through college without crippling debt. The good stuff that wealthy people take for granted feels completely out of reach. It feels like another planet.
You feel stuck.
You feel completely stuck. Now, you could save that lottery money, but saving $400 a year isn't going to buy you a house. It's not going to change your life in a visible way.
Yeah.
But the lottery ticket,
It's the dream.
it is the only time in your life where you can hold a tangible hope of having those things. For the minute before you scratch it, the dream is real. They are paying for the feeling of maybe.
The source material puts it really well. It says
Yeah.
you don't have to agree with the logic to understand that decisions are made based on internal narratives and emotional needs, not just spreadsheets.
Exactly. And once you accept that, you stop judging and you start understanding. And I think that leads us directly to the forces that shape those narratives, often without us even realizing it. Luck and risk.
Yes, these are the siblings of luck and risk.
We often ignore them because
Yeah.
they're hard to measure. And frankly, it's rude to point them out.
Yeah, if I tell you that you're successful because you got lucky, you'll be offended. You'll list all the hard work you did.
And if I fail and I tell myself it was just bad luck, I sound like I'm making excuses.
But the reality is, outcomes are rarely 100% due to effort. The world is too complex for that. And the Bill Gates story is the perfect illustration of this. We all know Bill Gates is a genius. He's hardworking, but the sources highlight a specific stroke of luck that is mind-boggling.
It goes back to 1968. Bill Gates went to Lakeside School in Seattle.
And Lakeside wasn't just any school.
No. In 1968, most colleges didn't even have a computer. But a math teacher at Lakeside, Bill Dougal, petitioned the Mothers Club to use the proceeds from a rummage sale to lease a teletype Model 30 timesharing terminal.
A rummage sale put a computer in a high school in 1968.
Yes. And this wasn't just having a computer, it was having a computer that students were actually allowed to use. Most universities kept them locked away for the PhDs. Gates had unlimited access to a computer at age 13. He could code in real time.
The math on this is wild. The sources break it down. There were roughly 303 million high school-age people in the world at that time.
Right. About 18 million lived in the U.S. About 270,000 lived in Washington State. A little over 100,000 lived in Seattle. And only about 300 went to Lakeside.
That is a 1 in a million statistic.
Literally 1 in a million. If there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. Gates himself admits that. He said, if there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. He had the skill, yes. But he also had a 1 in a million stroke of luck that gave him the environment to apply that skill 10 years before anyone else.
But here's the other side of the coin. The sibling, risk. Because Bill Gates had a best friend at Lakeside.
Kent Evans.
Tell us about Kent.
Kent Evans was Bill Gates' best friend in 8th grade. By Gates' own account, Kent was the best student in the class. He was just as smart, just as ambitious. They shared this business mind. They actually planned to be CEOs together. They were going to conquer the world as a duo.
So why don't we know the name Kent Evans? Why isn't it Gates and Evans?
Because before they graduated high school, Kent went mountaineering. And he died in an accident.
And the odds of that.
The odds of a high schooler dying on a mountain in the U.S. are roughly 1 in a million.
Wow. So you have two incredible minds sitting in the exact same classroom. One experiences 1 in a million luck getting into Lakeside. The other experiences 1 in a million risk, the fatal accident.
Both were equally skilled. Both were equally driven. But they ended up on opposite sides of the probability distribution. It's a really sobering reminder.
It really is. It makes you realize that we need to be very careful who we praise and who we look down upon.
Exactly. As the sources say, nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. When you see someone super successful, realize luck played a role. When you see someone fail, realize risk played a role. It fosters a bit more humility in how we view success.
Speaking of success and the lack of humility, let's talk about never enough.
Oh, this is a dangerous trap. The danger of having everything and still wanting more. The complete inability to see the finish line.
We have two incredible examples here, Rashad Gupta and Bernie Madoff. Now, we know Madoff as the fraudster, but before that, he was legit,
He
right?
was. That's what people forget. Before the Ponzi scheme, Madoff ran a legitimate market-making business. It was highly profitable. He was earning between $25 and $50 million a year.
$50 million a year. That is, I never have to worry about anything ever again money. That is generational wealth.
And Rajat Gupta, he was an orphan from Kolkata who rose to become the CEO of McKinsey, a true self-made success story. He retired with a net worth of $100 million. He sat on the boards of Goldman Sachs and Procter& Gamble. He had everything: respect, power, wealth.
But it wasn't enough.
No. Gupta wanted to be a billionaire. He was in these circles with private equity tycoons, and next to them, his $100 million made him feel, honestly, poor.
That is mind-blowing, feeling poor with $100 million.
It's the psychology of comparison. So in 2008, he learned that Warren Buffett was about to invest in Goldman Sachs. This was highly classified insider information. He called the hedge fund manager, Rajaratnam, and leaked the info to make a quick profit.
He risked a $100 million reputation and a life of total freedom for, what, a little bit more?
Yeah, he went to prison. Both of them did. And the diagnosis is the exact same. Neither man had a sense of enough. They risked what they did have and needed for what they didn't have and didn't need.
That distinction, risking what you need for what you don't need, is powerful, and it seems to stem entirely from social comparison.
It's a ladder that never ends. The source breaks this down beautifully. A rookie baseball player compares himself to Mike Trout, who has a $430 million contract. The rookie feels broke.
Right, but then Mike Trout might compare himself to a top hedge fund manager making $340 million a year.
And that hedge fund manager compares himself to Jeff Bezos, whose net worth can fluctuate by $24 billion in a single year.
The ceiling is just too high. You cannot win that game.
That's why I love the Las Vegas dealer wisdom mentioned in the notes. The only way to win in a Las Vegas casino is to exit as soon as you enter.
Walk away.
The only way to win the comparison game is to stop playing. Enough doesn't mean you have to settle for earning too little. It just means realizing that the goalpost has to stop moving eventually. If your expectations rise with your results, you'll never be satisfied. You'll just be running on a faster treadmill until you fall off.
So we've covered luck, risk, and the psychology of enough. Now I want to get into the math that feels like magic. Compounding.
Ah, yes. The H wonder of the world.
But the sources use a really unexpected analogy here. Ice ages.
Yes. This is such a cool connection. Pun intended, I guess. So for a long time, scientists couldn't figure out why the Earth had these cycles of ice ages. They thought maybe the Earth froze over because of brutally cold winters.
Which makes intuitive sense. Cold winter equals lots of ice.
But the reality is counterintuitive. It wasn't until a Serbian scientist named Milutin Milankovic did the math on the Earth's tilt. He realized that ice ages aren't caused by cold winters at all. They are caused by cool summers.
Yeah, okay, unpack that. How does a cool summer make the whole world freeze?
Well, if you have a cool summer, the snow from the previous winter doesn't melt completely. It stays. That leftover ice base makes it easier for snow to accumulate the next winter, which reflects more sun, causing more cooling, and then the next summer, even less melts.
It compounds.
Exactly. A small change, just a slightly cooler summer, compounds over thousands of years into miles-thick sheets of ice covering the entire planet. You don't need a massive event. You just need a small thing that keeps adding to itself without interruption.
And this brings us to the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett.
The ultimate example of the cool summer effect. We obsess over Buffett's stock picking. We analyze his trades, his businesses, but his secret isn't just his returns. It's his time.
The numbers here are just mind-blowing. Buffett's net worth is roughly $84.5 billion. But listen to this. $81.5 billion of that came after his 65th birthday.
Think about that. $81.5 billion after he qualified for Social Security.
That is absurd. It implies that almost all of his wealth is just the result of hanging around.
It is. If Buffett has started investing at age 30 with $25,000, which is totally normal, successful trajectory, and then retired at 60,
Okay.
even with his amazing annual returns, his net worth would be roughly $11.9 million.
Wait, 11.9 million versus 84.5 billion.
Yes. That is 99.9% less than his actual worth. The reason he is a multi-billionaire is that he started when he was a child, and he never stopped. He's been compounding for 3/4 of a century. The snow never melted.
We really struggle with this kind of thinking, don't we? Linear thinking is easy. 8 plus 8 plus 8. Exponential thinking, 8 times 8 times 8. It just breaks our brains.
As we underestimate it constantly. Let's
Yeah.
take Jim Simons as another example. He runs Renaissance Technologies. He has 66% annual returns. That cripples Buffett's returns.
Triples them.
But Simons is 75% less rich than Buffett. Why? Because he found his stride much later in life. He hasn't had the time. The takeaway here is that you don't need to find the highest returns. You don't need to find the next Bitcoin. You need decent returns that you can sustain for the longest period of time.
Basically, the most powerful book on investing, as the source jokes, should be titled Shut Up and Wait.
Shut up and wait. It's perfect, but waiting is hard if you get wiped out. Which leads us to the difference between getting wealthy and staying wealthy.
Two completely different skills.
Getting wealthy requires risk. It requires optimism, putting yourself out there, taking a swing. Staying wealthy requires paranoia. It requires humility.
Survival's the only strategy.
It is. If you get wiped out, you can't compound. Let's look at the story of Jesse Livermore and Abraham Jermansky. This takes us back to the 1929 crash.
Jesse Livermore, the famous trader.
In 1929, he shorted the market. He bet that stocks would fall. So when the crash happened and Wall Street was in absolute panic, people jumping out of windows, the ticker tape running hours late, he came home to his wife who was crying, thinking they were ruined. And he told her, "No, darling, I just had my best trading day ever."
He made $3 billion in today's money in a single day.
He was the king of the world. Meanwhile, Abraham Jermansky, a multimillionaire real estate developer, bet heavily on the boom. He lost everything in the crash, was seen wandering Wall Street, tearing up ticker tape, and likely took his own life.
So Livermore won. He was good at getting wealthy.
He was. But he wasn't good at staying wealthy. That massive win gave him a swelled head. He felt invincible. 4 years later, overflowing with overconfidence, he made bigger and bigger bets. He lost everything. And tragically, like Jermansky, he eventually took his own life.
Both were good at the offense. Only one needed defense, but neither had it.
And then there's Rick Guerin. This is a story I hadn't heard before this deep dive. We all know Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, but apparently there used to be a third partner.
Yes. Rick Guerin. They were a trio, Buffett, Munger, and Guerin. They interviewed together, invested together.
So why don't we know him?
Well, Buffett says Rick was just as smart as us, but he was in a hurry.
In a hurry, that's the key. In the massive downturn of 1973 and 1974, he was leveraged. He was investing with borrowed money to try to get rich faster. The market dropped 70%. He got margin called. He was forced to sell his Berkshire shares at $40 just to cover his loans.
$40 a share? Do you know what those are worth now?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars each.
Ouch.
Buffett and Munger weren't in a hurry. They knew they would get rich eventually. Rick needed it now. And that need for speed, that lack of paranoia about the short-term obstacles, completely wiped him out of history.
So the lesson is what the sources call the barbelled personality.
Right. You need to be optimistic about the long-term future, but paranoid about the short-term obstacles that could wipe you out before you get there.
Speaking of growth and getting there, let's talk about where returns actually come from. Section 6, tails drive everything.
This is the concept that a vast majority of returns come from a tiny percentage of events, the tail of the distribution curve.
The art collector Heinz Berggruen is a great example here. He was incredibly successful. But when you look at his actual collection...
He bought tons of art. 99% of it was average. It didn't appreciate much. But the 1%, the Picassos, the Matisses, those went up so much in value that they paid for everything else and then some. He was basically an index fund of art.
It's the same with Disney.
It is. In the mid-1930s, Disney was broke. They had produced over 400 cartoons. Most lost money. Then came Snow White. It earned $8 million in 6 months and paid off all their debts and bonuses. One tail event saved the entire company.
And this applies to the stock market, too. Look at the Russell 3000 index.
The data is stark. 40% of public companies in that index lost 70% of their value. All the returns of the entire index came from just 7% of the companies. The tail winners, like Apple and Amazon.
So if you're an investor, you can be wrong a lot.
You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. That is not intuitive at all. We think we need to be right every single time. But tails drive everything means that a few massive winners will carry the load for a lot of losers.
This brings us to the user experience example. Sue, Jim, and Tom. I love this because it makes it so practical for you and me.
It really does. Let's look at 3 hypothetical investors over the period from 1900 to 2019.
Okay.
Sue invests $1 every single month, rain or shine. She ends with $435,000.
Nice.
Jim invests only when the economy is not in a recession. He sells during a recession. He ends with 257,000.
They drop.
And Tom waits 6 months after a recession ends to buy back in. He ends with 234,000.
Sue wins by an absolute landslide.
And here is why. Investing is hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. The tail events, the rapid recoveries right after the crashes, are where the money is made. If you sit out the terror like Jim and Tom did, you miss the recovery. How you behave during that 1% of time when everyone is panicking determines your lifetime returns.
So we've accumulated this wealth, we've compounded, we've survived the terror. What is it all for? Section 7, freedom, the highest dividend.
This is my favorite section, the man in the car paradox.
The author recalls working as a valet. When a Ferrari pulled up, he never looked at the driver. He only imagined himself in the car.
That is the paradox. People buy fancy things to gain respect and admiration, but observers don't admire the owner. They use the object to fantasize about their own status.
Takeaway being, humility and kindness bring more respect than horsepower.
And that wealth is what you don't see. Rich is current income, it's visible spending, driving a $100,000 car. Wealth is income not spent. It's the $100,000 still sitting in the bank.
The diet analogy is perfect here. Exercise is like income. Eating is like spending. Wealth is the calorie deficit. It's the gap between what you could eat and what you actually do eat.
But the problem is, we can't see wealth, so we can't imitate it. We only see rich spending.
Which leads us to controlling your time. The happiness data.
Angus Campbell's research shows the strongest predictor of well-being is having a strong sense of controlling one's life.
Not the size of your house.
No. But look at the historical shift. We are richer than the 1950s. Median income doubled. We have bigger houses, better cars. But we are not happier.
Because of the way we work now.
Exactly. Look at John D. Rockefeller's job. He didn't use his hands, he used his mind. He looked like he was doing nothing sitting on his porch, but he was always thinking.
And now?
Most jobs today are Rockefeller jobs. They are decision and knowledge-based. You can't leave work at the factory anymore. The factory is your phone and your head. You work 24/7. We use our wealth to buy stuff, but we gave up control of our time.
So saving allows for freedom. It buys you back your time.
Yes. Saving is the gap between your ego and your income. You don't even need a specific goal to save. You save to gain flexibility in a hyper-competitive world. Flexibility is the new competitive advantage over intelligence.
And finally, we have to talk about reasonable versus rational. The syphilis cure.
This is wild. Julius Wagner Jauregg cured syphilis by giving patients malaria.
Wait, what?
The dangerously high fevers from the malaria killed the syphilis bacteria. A fever is not just a nuisance, it's a defense mechanism.
How does that possibly apply to money?
Being cold and rational implies you should always make the mathematically perfect decision. Being reasonable admits you are an emotional human being.
Okay, give me an example.
Paying off a low-interest mortgage. Mathematically, it might be wrong. You could earn more investing that money in stocks. But if having no debt gives you peace of mind, if it's the fever that protects you from panic, it is the reasonable choice. Because it helps you sleep at night and stick to your long-term plan.
Wow, we covered a lot today.
It's quite a journey. But the common thread is clear. Money is about how you behave. It's about survival, patience, and understanding your own psychology.
Do you have a final provocative thought for everyone listening?
I do. If wealth is what you don't see, reconsider who your role models are. The person you admire most might be the one driving the Honda Civic, while the person in the Ferrari is teetering on bankruptcy. Define your own enough.
I love it. Thanks for the deep dive.
My pleasure.
And to you listening, go chop some firewood, build some flexibility, and we'll catch you on the next one.